afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our first Teal Talk of the 2024 Scleroderma Awareness Month. Appreciate you all taking the time to join us this afternoon. If we haven't met, my name is Brian Perkins. I'm the Director of Communications for the National Scleroderma Foundation. I'm going to be moderating, and I think by moderating, we can safely say I'm just going to be introducing our panelists and then really letting them kind of take over the show. I'll help ask some questions that you all have submitted as you were registering over the course of the last couple of weeks. But I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate you all letting me be part of this conversation and letting me listen to some of your stories and questions and things like that. So without further ado, let me introduce our three panelists. We have Amanda Lippincott, Sade Taylor, and Nikhil Bhatt. They're all here and willing to share their stories and answer some questions. I'll let them each introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their journey as we get started. So Nikhil, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Nikhil Bhatt. I'm a 41-year-old scleroderma patient living just outside of Baltimore in Columbia, Maryland. I was diagnosed about 9 years ago, had my first symptoms 10 years ago, starting with Raynaud's and sliding right through the whole smorgasbord of interstitial lung disease and some heart involvement, some skin darkening, thickening. It was an interesting process getting diagnosed. I had to, in addition to being outside of the normal demographic, being younger and male, took a while for them to believe that it was scleroderma. And also being a person of color, skin changes were not something they were necessarily aware of as I was getting diagnosed. Along the way, I had a stem cell transplant in 2017 and was in remission for about 5 years, but came back it came roaring back in 2022. And since then, I've been looking for different treatments, different options to treat it. But along the way, obviously I was diagnosed about a year and a half after I got married. And so there was, a process of dealing with both my own spouse and with coworkers, friends, managers in how I was going to deal with scleroderma and deal with treatments. And, I've been trying to figure out, I'm trying to navigate that as I go along. So I've had experience with both taking time off, dealing with, applying for short-term disability at times for procedures I've had, as well as searching for a new job, which can be really, really challenging when you have a chronic illness and don't necessarily know what to say to the new folks you're working with. So I've had experience with a lot of that, and happy to share my experiences with all of you.
Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Sure. I'm Amanda Lippincott. I am 33 years old and I'm from New Jersey. I was diagnosed in 2019, so that was about 5 years ago. At that time, I started seeing the the swelling in my fingers and the skin tightening and joint pain. So I went to my doctor, and luckily I was diagnosed within 3 months. But I was diagnosed right before I was supposed to get married, and so that really kind of felt like my life blew up in a lot of ways. I can talk a lot about like working with the disease. I haven't really dated because I was gonna get married to my husband, but being able to communicate with him about the needs that, what I need, and communication in general with friends and family was hard. And then I also had a baby in 2022. So I did get pregnant while having this disease and have given birth. She is going to be 2 this year, and she's the love of our lives. She's amazing. So I can talk about pregnancy and about what I went through before and after, and what I'm dealing with now. Sade, Nikhil, and I are all on the patient advisory board. We all do advocacy work, so we're so happy to be here and to answer questions and share our stories with you all.
Thank you, Amanda. Sade, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sade Taylor. I'm 30 years old. I was diagnosed about 6 years ago. Um, some of my initial symptoms, yeah, swelling in the hands, really being kind of tied to open jars, like suddenly out of nowhere, and just like extreme tiredness. I think some of my experience, I was actually diagnosed while I was in grad school. So I had, you know, finished my undergrad degree, actually took a year off just because I needed a break and I was working full time when I decided to go back into, school because with my field, it's a thing that you need an advanced degree. So I said, okay, I'm finally ready to do that. So I was working a full-time job and I was going back to school full time. So from after work, like 9 to 5, I would drive straight to class from like 6 to 9. And I started getting overwhelmingly tired. And at first, I thought it was just my new lifestyle. Like, this is just me adjusting. I'm just tired from all of this extra stuff that I've picked up. But no, that wasn't it. There was something more there going on, which, I started getting some color changes also in my skin, which would be very noticeable, for a darker skin, person, to know that your pigment is changing, you're losing pigment. So I had, followed up with a primary care at first who, later referred me to a dermatologist who, did some tests and biopsies and was able to know like very, very quickly within like a month that, this is actually something else. This is scleroderma. I think you need to see a rheumatologist. And that's ultimately how I got diagnosed. So happy to share more about just kind of navigating diagnosis, kind of working and going through school, what that was like, and coping with that, and then sharing with your support system, like family and friends, and also dating after as well. Dating after diagnosis. It sounds like a show, dating after diagnosis. But yes, and some of the work that I do here is, like Amanda said, I'm also on the patient advisory board with her and Teal, and I also am a facilitator for our BIPOC support group. So excited for the conversation.
Thank you all so much. So one of the questions that was submitted to us, and I think maybe we can all, or all of you can touch on, really any advice on making new friends, and maybe I'll even add on there, kind of talking about your diagnosis with your existing friends who have been part of your life already to that point. Nikhil, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I was gonna let the ladies go first. I'll go ahead and say that it was. I mean, you have the thing where when you're younger, like you don't want to stand out necessarily. It's not even that you don't want to. I think you're afraid of like reactions. It's kind of a downer when you bring that. Oh, by the way, I have a chronic illness and it's gonna upend my life. Anyway, how are you doing? How was pizza last week? It's just it's a tough topic to broach. So with my wife, we knew it was going to change things. We were thinking about starting a family at that time, and we chose against it just because of the the situation we were in, with the way that it was affecting my lungs and just everything else that was going on in our lives at that time. So we had to make some hard decisions, but the important thing was, we were doing as much as we could to communicate. And, one of the things that I'm grateful for is that I did have a support system with her, especially. She was able to, I told her what I was going through, and I was still kind of in shock during part of my diagnosis. But we were able to say, like, okay, well, here's where we are. Here's what I don't think I can do. Here's what how things are going to work. And we had some frank discussions about, what do we foresee our lives being like? That was huge because that was, she's my rock, and it was important to have that groundwork. Whether it's your family, your chosen family, your close circle of friends, you got to have that base. As far as other friends, it really depended on how close we were. There were folks who I knew we hung out every weekend, and I had to let them know, hey, I'm on immunosuppressants now. If you get sick, you gotta let me know. Don't hide behind the it's just allergies. Like, you have to let me know. And it's tough to bring that up. Like I said, it becomes a downer, but you've got to advocate for yourself, because no one else is going to, even if you have a good support system. So you've got to stick up for yourself, and you've got to know who's there for you, and be willing to have those hard, honest conversations about what you need now that your needs have changed.
Sade, do you have anything to add on advice making new friends and how you're connecting with your current group of friends?
Yeah, I would second a lot of what Nikhil said. I think communication is super important. Like when you're navigating chronic illness, disease, or just, a condition that you yourself are still kind of adapting to. I think for me, I had a period of just denial of the whole thing. I didn't want to talk about it really to my current friends and circle that I had. I think I first found a little bit of a safe house talking to my family about it, just because they kind of knew a little bit what I was going through with like just the tiredness and, hand swelling and things like that. But I found myself, after really talking to the doctors and they springing upon me all this new information that I've never heard before. I was like a deer in the headlights talking to these doctors. I mean, I didn't know what they were saying. I've never heard of this. And I actually didn't know who to talk to after, once I was ready to start processing the information. So I think for me, I found my first line of defense was really just my own family, and getting comfortable kind of opening up my real feelings and processing it out loud with people I trust. So it was my parents, and they were super supportive, like, whatever you need to do just to get through this, like, we can support you with that. If you want to just take a break with everything, school and work, because at this point I live by myself, so these bills had to get paid some kind of way, so I had to keep working. So if you need to just take a break with school and stuff like that, you can move back home, whatever you wanted to do. So I think once I started getting comfortable, at least even saying it out loud, like, hey, I was diagnosed with something called scleroderma. It's rare, it's this, it's that, and this is how it affects me, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. It did take me some time to be able to actually talk to my current friends about it. It took me a long time, actually, because again, I think back to what Nikhil was saying, it's not like, hey, I want pity now. All of a sudden, everything was just fine. Now something has changed, and I don't want you to look at me different or treat me different. It's just, this is what I'm going through. I just want your support. So I think it takes time. Honestly, I think it just takes time for you to kind of acknowledge it, cope, deal with where you are, and get to a point where you feel comfortable. But I will say, like, the more and more you talk about it, I think the more and more you get comfortable talking about it. I think I advanced like levels of talking to my family about it, then some of my friends, and then bringing it up to relationships. For me, that was the hardest part. Because as I'm dating, I didn't even know where to enter that into the conversation. You're getting to know somebody. When is the right time? Is it in month 3? Is it in month 7 of talking to somebody where you're starting to tell them, oh, guess what? I actually have to tell you something else. So I think it was baby steps for me, whereby, baby steps of, I'm just going to share this little piece about it first, see how you kind of react and see how the trust forms. And then I can let you in a little bit more on kind of my symptoms, my feeling, how I get overwhelmed with this disease, and how I just need you to support me with it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Amanda, do you have anything to add on making new friends and navigating your current friendships? And
Yeah, so I know one of the things that we haven't really touched on was making new friends. And I think that that's hard in any situation, especially the older that you get, you kind of have this established friend group. But I will say one of the biggest ways to like that I made new friends was actually going to conference and making friends who have scleroderma. It was so much of a relief that they understood what I was going through, and I didn't have to talk to them. I didn't have to say, like, they knew what it was. They knew what I was going through. You know, we could all see, like, oh, we're all tired. Like, you know, I didn't have to explain myself over and over again. I didn't have to stop and say, you know, one of the things that I really struggled with my current friend group, and they're better now, but when I was first diagnosed, is like saying no to things, like saying, oh, I can't go, but I still want you to invite me. I still want you to include me, and I might not be able to make it at that time. Like, I might say yes now, but I might say no, that I can't make it later on because someone's sick or I'm just not feeling up to it. But being around people who have this disease, it was so just, it was such a relief to just say, you know, we're all just gonna do this, we're all gonna do that, and we could all take our time and no one had to over explain. But yeah, I want to just second that, like, communication was absolutely key. I was kind of thrown into the fire with, like, having to tell people. My family was with me when I got my diagnosis. I had to tell my husband, who was very supportive and has been supportive to this day. I had to tell my work because I was taking a lot of time to go to these doctor's appointments, and, you know, doctors are the most inconvenient, where it's like 9 to 3, and that's right during the middle of working hours. So I had to let them know that I was going to these appointments. So for me, it was just kind of like, I had a script of things that I was going to say, and this is, you know, I got diagnosed with scleroderma, and this is what it is, and this is how it affects me. And that was really helpful for me. And telling my friends, just like, hey, this is what I have. I want you to still include me, but these are some of the things that might happen because of my diagnosis. Like, I might say yes and then say no, and so on and so forth. So I think that just really preparing yourself to have those hard and difficult conversations is another great way to really just, like, prepare, you know, just like have that, like, this is what I'm going to say in mind.
Thank
I
you.
just want to,
Go
if you
ahead,
don't mind, I just want to add one thing. So to both their points, like, you end up being a teacher, and unfortunately, you know, once you're done processing on your own, or even while you're still processing, you'll end up having to be, you know, become a teacher for other people and an educator, and having your talking points helps. One thing that, you know, I don't want to be down here, but, like, one thing you're going to learn is there are some people who don't deal with it well. There are people who either just deny it. Oh, it's not a big deal. You know, we'll like during COVID, especially, oh, it's not a big deal. We'll put you on the other side of the room. You'll be fine. It's like, no, that's not how that works. You know, oh, it won't be too cold if you have rain. I was like, oh, we'll give you a beer koozie. It'll be fine. Like, that's there's a lot of that, and even people who will just shy away from you because they don't want to deal with, sickness or something like that. It will happen, and it really sucks. But what you have to understand is there are people out there, whether it be your family, your chosen family, your friends, those of us in the scleroderma community, there's someone out there who, has your back and knows exactly what you're going through, and seek them out. Because, even though there are some people out there who suck, like, you need to take care of yourself, and you need to find people who care about you, and will help you take care of yourself. So.
Okay, and I want to thank everybody. We've got some questions coming in the chat, and please feel free to continue to ask those. I'll work them into our conversation as well. Nikhil, I think you kind of started to touch on in the workplace. Do you have any advice on when do you talk to your boss, your supervisor? And then another question we had in the chat was, did you talk to human resources about accommodations, things like that?
Yeah, so initially, so I got diagnosed in 2015. I was and immediately, like, man, I had to talk to my manager, who I was on, had a really good relationship with, but I told her, like, hey, I'm going to be taking a fair amount of PTO. I'll try to keep you, obviously I'll update my calendar. I'll try to keep people on notice, but just know I'm going to be in and out. Because the great thing about autoimmune diseases is you have like 8 different doctors, and none of them have convenient scheduling times. And so, like, it was going to be a lot of, and in New York, you're taking the subway and bus and train to try and to get places. And so I was like, there might be days where I have to take the whole day off. There are days I'm gonna have to do that. My current job, I've gotten a lot better lately about accepting the fatigue part of it. I was resisting it for a long time, but understanding even if I have a morning appointment, I might be wiped out for the rest of the day. And letting my boss know, like, hey, I'm still on board. I'm still part of the team. I just want to let you know what's up with me. And I think telling people ahead of time generally makes people a lot more comfortable with dealing with it. That's true of coworkers I've had who are close with me on the team. They're like, do whatever you need. Just let me know ahead of time so you don't just disappear into the hospital, the bowels of a hospital or something. As far as asking HR, the main accommodations I asked for were around remote work and around my short-term disability. So I took short-term disability while I was out for the stem cell transplant. So I had the transplant over the course of, it was several procedures over the course of a month, and then I was out for about 6 to 8 weeks after that while my immune system built back up. And that was a pretty straightforward procedure. You don't have to, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get too deep into the employment law, but you shouldn't have to describe too much about about your condition, what you need to do. Just provide the bare minimum amount of information. This goes for your managers as well. If you don't feel comfortable at that time telling them the full story, just say like, hey, I have some chronic health issues. This is what's coming up. But I didn't have a problem with taking leave for my procedures or taking PTO for sick time. The one thing that I did have was during return to work, because I work in a larger corporation, and people are obsessed with returning to office. And I actually, so before the pandemic, because of my own health, I ended up moving down to Maryland. I was based in New York, moved down to Maryland, and I did have to get special permission from HR. I had a rheumatologist who worked closely with me to craft the letter such that HR approved it. But it allowed me to work remotely closer to my doctors here in Baltimore. And I agreed pre-COVID to come up, X number of times a month or X number of weeks in a year to visit the greater team. After COVID, I did have to, ask for accommodations for remote work. And they were approved, but I know some people who it didn't work for, and I know not all of us are in jobs where we can ask for that. The biggest thing is, again, advocate for yourself. As long as it's a reasonable accommodation, things like, working with your employer for, changing the temperature if you have Raynaud's. The biggest thing is that time off. If you need to rest, if you need to change your work hours, as long as it doesn't detract from your job, you do have the right to ask HR about that. There are a lot of resources I can, post or send in a follow-up email for how to discuss that. But as an employee, you do have a lot of freedom to talk to HR, even an informal thing like with your boss, as long as you're getting the job done.
Thank you. So we've talked about new friendships. We've talked about work and that navigating those relationships. Sade, would you mind talking a little bit about, you started talking a little bit about when you start dating and kind of how you talk about your diagnosis and those situations?
Yeah. So, yes, again, going back to trust and open communication and things like that. And when you start feeling comfortable, I think I really want to stress it because it's not going to happen overnight where you wake up and you're comfortable to talk about it to somebody you're dating. I think that was something I myself had to realize in the dating process. It's okay if I do not feel comfortable to mention it, the first several times getting to know this person until you actually do feel comfortable. I'll share a quick story. I remember I actually was dating somebody, after being diagnosed, and I had not mentioned anything about the disease, anything about what I kind of go through. And I remember specifically going grocery shopping with this person, and we were, by the fridges and freezers, and it was cold. And immediately, my fingers started turning, the colors and the Raynaud started happening, and he noticed. And he's like, oh, like, are you okay? And I was like, oh, like it happens when my hands get really cold. And the first thing was like, how come you never told me that? And then I think like that was the moment that it resonated with me. How come I never told him that? I don't know. I didn't even have a good answer for why I never told you that. I just never did, right? And I think that right there was my first indication that, I might be playing this up a little bit more than it needs to. Like these feelings, I might be making them bigger than what they are. It seems like people are actually a little bit open, if you just tell them. So I think that was my first encounter with somebody I was dating, actually caring about what are you going through right now and like, how can I help? Because from there it's like, oh, then if you can't go like grab something out of those sections, just let me know, I can grab it. And it was just those little small changes that started to make me feel comfortable that okay, I can have these conversations with somebody, they actually care, in a way that's not so daunting for me to discuss it. So that was like some of the very first encounters I had kind of talking about the disease and the journey and my comfortability and stuff like that with a person, a significant other, so to say. And then I think just later on, as I've dated other people and had these experiences too, I start building on them that, yep, hey, if you want to plan an outing or something with me, I would prefer not to do things like where it's a cold environment. Like I don't take it well. I have something called Raynaud's. So I just start with like little things, letting them know I have something called Raynaud's. It's not going to work. I'd rather do something else that does not involve the colds. Let's just start there. And then, as time goes on, another person I've dated, ask more questions like, oh, okay, can you tell me more about, I remember one time you had mentioned to me, like you had Raynaud's, like, do you want to tell me more about it? Or is there anything else I should know? And I think that kind of opened the door too. So again, all takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time with getting to know, the person that you're dating and them asking the right questions and you feeling comfortable. And eventually, I can't even tell you over the course of what span, but eventually I, got to a place where I was like, okay, fine. This is called scleroderma. This is what I have. This is, why I prefer these type of settings versus others. This is how it affects me and so on and so forth. And then to my surprise, the reaction was pretty positive. I was like, oh, okay. And very similarly to the last one, it's just like, oh, that's it. Why didn't you just tell me that before? So I think having those experiences will help you later on understand that, okay, I should feel, or I can be a little bit more comfortable sharing my symptoms and aspects about my journey with people that I'm dating.
Thank you so much. Amanda, would you like to talk a little bit about, navigating this diagnosis with your partner, and then you've also had the made the choice to have a child, and what that was like, and talk about that for us.
Sure. So talking with my husband, I remember sitting down with him right after my diagnosis and saying, this right before we got married, this is what this disease is. And, you're gonna like, do you want to be with someone who, has this disease? These are the things that could come up. These are some of the, we had a very long conversation about what the future could look like. And he was very supportive. We talked a lot about children, and for us, it was, if we don't try, then I feel like we wouldn't know. So we're like, let's talk to the doctors. Let's see what they have to say. If they say no, like, then, that's it. We kind of understood that my health came first. Thankfully, my doctors were, pretty, because I caught it so early and I didn't have the heart and lung involvement just yet. They said that it was probably okay for me to try. So, but I did do a lot of testing during that period just to make sure that nothing was happening internally while I was off my medication. And then Charlotte was born, which, amazing. And she's great. And she was born a little bit small. She was 4 pounds, 13 ounces. So we really weren't prepared for that. But my husband and I had to have a lot of like really deep conversations about how care looks like going forward. So because I had a flare afterwards, my hands, they started, a little bit to contracting. My skin was tighter, and it wasn't bouncing back as easily. Thankfully, getting back on medicine has helped to straighten a little bit of that out. But I didn't have any of the internal involvement. So that was where my doctor was very happy about that. But I would have flares, running around after a toddler. It's hard. It's not, having to get up every 2 to 3 hours to feed a baby. And then, there was a point in time where she wasn't sleeping. So then we had, you're not getting sleep. So then you're exhausted and you're fatigued, and you still have to get up and parent the next day because they need you. They can't do things on their own. So my husband and I really have created a good schedule, something that works for us, where, he does some of the we alternate who does bedtime, and he's very like in tune with like what I need. He helps out around the house if I have just one of those days that I can't like barely get up off the couch. Like he, says that my job is to watch Charlotte and, to get my work done, and, whatever I'm feeling up to doing is what I should do. So, there are a lot of things that like went into that decision, but it's an amazing having a baby was just something I didn't think was going to happen. If you asked me in 2019, I would have said, no, like, that's not what my life looks like. Like, I don't think it would ever happen. And now we have one, and it's an absolutely amazing experience. And, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So one of the questions we had, and forgive me because I don't recall Amanda, Shade, or Nikhil, if any of you deal with digestive symptoms yourself, but someone in our group asked about kind of navigating those in those social situations where you're eating and things like that. Do any of you all have any advice on that?
I could start. So I do have pretty severe GERD, and at times it'll mess with my lung issues, and I'll end up coughing. I've aspirated before, and unfortunately, I've done so in public a couple of times. It is absolutely mortifying. The thing you realize is like, so I have esophageal dysmotility, so that means my esophagus is basically just a champagne flute. And if you can imagine, quickly drinking beer is like pouring, a pint of beer into a champagne flute. It, gets messy very, very quickly. So, it's about figuring out what your limits are, and what you're comfortable with to begin with. And then when it comes to social situations, a lot of it ends up being compromise. So, now in this post-COVID world, I try really hard to push for outdoor dining. And, during summer that works great, but, I'm doing a lot fewer like brewery runs, for instance, with buddies, to worry about how much alcohol I drink. And a lot of folks have given it up altogether, because it works better for them. So it's really about like making, asking for subtle changes. But, if you need to, again, it's a lot of it is about advocating for yourself. And, it's a little like having a dietary restriction, like, if you're, have a vegetarian or vegan diet, or, have celiacs and have to have a gluten-free diet, you need to make those adjustments, for yourself. And a lot of restaurants, and of course your friends, would be happy to make those, as long as you, just work with them, see what you can do. It does limit a lot of things. There are a lot of foods I can't eat. I can't, shotgun beers like you could in college or anything like that. But, it's know your limits and stick to them is really the best advice I can give. And, if you have lower GI issues, which, some medications have caused me to have that happen, take whatever precautions you can, and just have an exit strategy. I carry an emesis bag with me in case things go haywire and I do need to vomit. My wife and I have like an exit plan. If I get really sick or feel really bad, we know how to gracefully like duck out of a situation. And it does suck. It's a lot more formal than you'd like it to be, but just know that, know what you need to do to get out of there fast, and just have a plan like that.
Thanks. We have another question from the chat about dealing with changes in your appearance and how you look, specifically with skin tightening or the mobility devices. Do any of you all have thoughts on that you'd like to share?
I can start. I did not, have some mobility devices or mobility issues, so I can't speak to that lens, but definitely, the skin tightening and just the loss of pigmentation. I don't have a golden answer. I wish I did. I think it's something that a lot of folks in the community are still figuring out, right? I will say that every single time I have an appointment, like I had moved recently and got established with a new rheumatologist where I am today, and getting to know this person, one of my main questions to him is there anything that you can magically prescribe for color changes in the skin? It's still something that I ask even today, right? And I've tried different things, but with my past rheumatologist, ointments, creams, steroids, you name it. I've seen a dermatologist for it to see, is there anything out there that can actually help with this? Are there some new things on the horizon that only some of you experts know about that may be able to assist? Unfortunately, I have not found that answer yet, but I have done things that made me feel more comfortable in the moment. I have, used body makeup. There's a whole, plethora of different solutions out there that people are inventing. I mean, not just for scleroderma patients that have lost pigment, but other conditions as well that have lost pigment, or you would like to just have a more even tone. Definitely, I 100% recommend exploring like body makeup issues if it's like pigment associated, and anything else that there is to just make you feel comfortable. I think it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's going to take time for you to, feel comfortable, but you have to start somewhere, doing those subtle changes and going out there and just, walking with your head held high and just say, this is who I am for now. I'm going to embrace it. Be positive. It's going to get better. But I think it's definitely, you're not alone with feeling like, oh, my appearance and how do I work through it. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've heard across the board that people are still trying to look for a solution for.
I'm going to really quickly comment that, like, I remember a quick story that when I first got diagnosed, I was losing weight really fast because of my GI issues, and I was dealing with skin hyperpigmentation, actually, getting darker. And I remember a couple of my more fashionista friends met me up at a happy hour, and they're like, "Oh, you look so thin and tan and ready to go." And I'm like, "Yeah, so about that." It was not a conscious choice. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you'll have to answer some really awkward questions, but it's about knowing, you don't have to apologize for that. You don't have to apologize for the way you look. I've got, thanks to Raynaud's and, a million other things that come with the disease, I have, bone demineralization in my fingertips, like they're slowly disappearing. And yeah, occasionally I have to kind of explain why my hands look weird. I know that, folks who are dealing with, especially if you have a rapidly evolving disease, you can go from it. And, we know patients like this who've gone from, healthy athletes, which I've never been, to really having to depend on mobility devices. And it's about saying like, hey, here's, this is me. This is who I am inside. And like Sade said, like it's gonna take some time to get used to the new you, but know that it is still you, and you don't deserve anything less just because you have changed. Just because your skin and connective tissue are being jerks. That's not your fault.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, sorry, add on that so I noticed a lot of changes with like my nose and my mouth. My mouth has gotten smaller, my lips have gotten smaller, my nose has gotten like much thinner. I think it's really hard to go through those changes because one day you see yourself in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself. And I think that part of that process is also grieving, like that you used to look like this, but this is a new chapter in your life, and that it's not always something to be like upset about, that you can find the positives in it. I know that that's like really cliche, but I do think that, thinking about it as like, this is just the next chapter. This is just like, I look like this now, and I have to being able to accept it. I know there was also a talk about mobility and like using different devices. Part of that, I have had to use a wheelchair in the past. I don't use a wheelchair most of the time, just because I can get around pretty well. But I remember going on vacations and specifically to Disney, and you're walking a lot, and my joints just seized up. It was just not great being there. So I had to get a wheelchair, and I felt so disheartened and so like, that I was relying on other people. And one of the things that like got me over that hump was like, this is something that I need. If I would push myself any further, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to hurt the people around me, because now I'm affecting everyone. Like if I, get a wheelchair, I know that it sucks, and I know that it's not what I wanted. It's not how I wanted my vacation to go. I think like to me, it was like I don't want to hurt myself even more. I don't want to go back home and have more problems and go to more doctors and continue this vicious cycle. So yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard for anyone. I think everyone in the community deals with it. And that's kind of why like talks like this and support groups are so vital, because you can talk to other people and everyone understands. And we might not have, the quick fix answer, but someone else might say, oh, this worked for me, or this worked for me. So I think just talking with other people is very helpful too.
We have I guess a similar question to that in our chat about dealing with the feeling that a partner is struggling with their attraction to you, or intimacy issues. Do you all have any thoughts on that?
I can jump back in on that if that's okay. I don't want to get like too specific or anything, but I think that it does happen. So please know that you're not alone in finding that your partner may not be attracted to you, or that you may not feel attraction or feel anything. But intimacy is not just physical, but it can also be emotional. I know that we talk a lot about this on our sync, young adult support group. So I'd be happy to go like into more detail if you wanted to join one of those groups. But I know some of the things that have worked for my husband and I is it's not always have to be like that physical intimacy, that like emotional, and just me being there for him has been helpful, especially when there's some things that I just can't do. There's just some things that, I might just feel too fatigued to do. But I think it's hard. I think communication too is just really key. Don't I don't know what you've talked about with your partner, but hopefully they are someone who can be understanding. If you just say like, this is the problems that I'm having, this is, I feel like you're not attracted, or that there's a loss of intimacy, and just being open to like what they're saying. And I know that actually at conference we have a talk about relationships and having like sex with scleroderma. So if you're going to conference, that might be a wonderful, wonderful talk to check out, just to see what other devices and what other things are out there that could potentially help you for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in and just say like, yeah, first of all, second to everything Amanda said, I feel like also for me, I've had issues with physical intimacy because of the side effects of scleroderma, and it really does, like, it started like I said, a couple years into my marriage. So it was just, it was a huge disappointment. And, much as I'd like to think of myself as, an enlightened, cishet male, like I still have, that feeling of emasculated or being emasculated by not, being able to be intimate in the way I was used to, or, I have, a really caring partner, she's worked with me and communicated with me about a lot of things, but there's still that like, distrust that, I have, like, am I worthy of X or Y, or, things like that. So, some of it is definitely communication, 100%. Some of it is also, accepting that, like, uh, you know, you may have to change your viewpoint, and just accept, sort of like we were saying with the last question, accept there will be a period where you're gonna have issues with that, where you're going to be going like this, this is a radical change in something that was really personal, really intimate, and a really strong connection with someone. And now it's just been turned upside down. And there will be, something of a grieving process. There will be some period, but the important thing is to move on that road towards acceptance, like understanding who you are, what you're capable of, and it is really tough. But making sure that you have someone you can talk through with it really helps.
That feels like maybe an opportunity here. All three of you are support group facilitators. Can you talk a little bit about your groups and kind of the role that they play in your lives, and maybe some of what you see and the impact that it has for the people who participate? Shadi, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So I'm a recent facilitator for the BIPOC group. For those of you who may not know what BIPOC stands for, it's Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So I think, that group really resonated with me, being an African American woman. And I think, we know that not everybody's journey is the same. No two people's journey is the same with this disease. It manifests and show up in just so many different ways with your symptoms and how it just manifests in your life. And I think something for me that I had really struggled with when first being diagnosed was, the changes in my skin color, because again, it's very similar to what, my peers here were talking about. It's you looking in the mirror one day and you're used to one version of yourself. And then another day, it's just not the same. It's not the person that you knew you were for the last 20 something semi-years. So I think that support group, I think, is really special to me, just because it welcomes kind of those different perspectives of looking at the disease through a very specific lens. Like, how does this disease also affect people of color? Like, are there more nuances there than, somebody else? Not saying that, it's that different, but you can see a color change probably more drastic on me than if I was a little bit lighter, if it was a hypopigmentation. So I think support groups like that are great. Once again, I think to Amanda's point, whether it's Sync or the men's group or BIPOC group, you having a specific focus where you can really feel comfortable to ask specific questions that, you may be struggling with or want maybe different perspectives or community on is super important. So would highly recommend, seeing all the list of support groups out there. There's a lot that the foundation offers, and whichever one resonates to you would be great to just find community in and ask more detailed questions later.
I can speak quickly. I'm not a facilitator, but I am a member of the 20%, the men's Scleroderma support group. And I'm not cool enough to be a facilitator like these other two lovely ladies, but I'm a member, and it really does help from that male perspective, because it is it is a disease that affects assigned female at birth individuals a lot more than males. And it's just nice to be in a space with other men and just be able to be vulnerable. that is part of the thing that, you know, it does come up, you know, talking with friends and, you know, being in the workplace, you know, you still have that ingrained, like, I gotta tough through this. I'm, you know, you know, I don't want to, break out about this. It's just a little, you know, my hand's turning purple, whatever. But being in that group really makes it easier to hear other guys say, like, yeah, this really bugs me. This really, like, makes me feel like less of whatever. And we could talk about, like, get that out in the open, with someone other than just, you know, our closest friends or our closest family. Like, we can kind of share those experiences, not only what works, but also just like, hey, it's okay to feel that way. You know, just having someone else say, yeah, it really does suck and I hate it too, makes you feel, a lot better of where you're at. So yeah.
And then I'll round it out with so I'm a co-leader for the SYNC group, which is Scleroderma Young Adults Seeking Connection. And it's a group for 18 to 40-year-olds. And we talk about everything under the sun dealing with young adults. So from intimacy to traveling, you know, a lot of us have issues on being diagnosed at a younger age. We want to still live with this disease, you know, years and years down the road, but you know, we want children. Yeah, some people want children, some people don't want children. Some people, you know, a dating, you know, like Sade was saying, how do you tell someone that this is a disease? How do you tell your friends? So we really take like the topics that we talked about and touched on today, and go in more in depth in them. It's such an amazing community. And then I lead another support group for young adults, just kind of you know, more of a chat. It's less structured. It's you know, more of just like, how's everyone doing, support group. But the sync group is really great for, you know, those looking for something specific to look into. And, you know, we talked about like travel and conference and how, you know, some accommodations for someone with scleroderma and how, what you can bring, what you can't bring, you know, things like that, things that we're looking into that we're like, oh, you know what, like, this is really important for a young adult, and this is a topic that I'd really like to talk about. Mental health is another big one too. So yeah, all of our support groups that we're a part of are wonderful in their own right. I think that they all have such a great place, and such a, you know, our community needs that, where we can say, okay, you know what, we have a young adult, we have a men's, we have a BIPOC, like these are all things that, you know, we can talk and feel free to express ourselves, and not have to hide behind anything.
We have just a quick couple minutes, but I don't want to leave this question unaddressed. We had someone who was talking about being they're newly diagnosed, and I think they were curious about maybe if you all can talk a little bit about the beginning of your journeys and how you manage that, and if you have any tips for kind of managing those emotions that come up. Shade, would you like to start?
Yeah, no, I love this question. Excuse me. Yes, I think it's perfectly normal to feel all the emotions, you know, and you need to give yourself that grace and and it's okay to feel it. You literally can just take a moment and tell yourself, it is okay for me to feel all these emotions, because it's perfectly normal and part of that grieving process and coping and just understanding where you are now and your new normal. I think it's super important to stay positive though through the disease and think about what can I still do? How do I not let this define who I am moving forward? I think being part of communities like this is great, because there are some amazing people in this community who are doing amazing things, even with scleroderma. They are going on to start businesses and podcasts and books and create websites with resources. I mean, a bunch of things that really just really motivate you to say, well, I guess I can still do something. I can push through and still make it. So I think I had to really surround myself with positive people that were not just who are speaking life into me. Don't just tell me all the negatives. I think your only friend shouldn't be your doctors. No, that's just negative on negative and negative. I think you need also to surround yourself with positive folks who are still going to push you. Let's go for the walk. I know you're a little tired, but if you can, let's just go outside. Let's see nature. Let's, if you can have one drink, why not? Let's go do that, right? To really, again, just push you to really still enjoy your new normal, enjoy your life. It doesn't have to define who you are. You can definitely just kind of beat the odds and people's perceptions of what it is to have scleroderma. So I think finding things that you like and just pushing yourself to do it, even if you're not feeling it, even if you feel, I really don't feel like doing this thing. If these are your hobbies that you had pre-scleroderma, if you can, I would just encourage you to still kind of execute those, just to at least you can, feel a sense of belonging, like you haven't completely lost yourself. And I think that will just help you overall just remain positive. And last thing I'll say is I had started using it to my advantage. I'm actually in the healthcare, like a healthcare background, administration. And I started incorporating it as part of my story to really empower me that, yes, I can speak to this because I have gone to school for healthcare administration. So I know how to do the business side, but I've also been a patient. I also understand the complexities of navigating having a disease. So I will say use it, when you can, use your voice. There's power in kind of talking about your story too, to remain positive on what you can do and where you can go.
Man, if you don't mind, I could jump in here just really quickly. So yeah, absolutely. It does take a while to get used to the new normal. I'm someone who's pretty good at, pushing feelings down and trying to, just push them away. Like, this is a bad feeling. I don't want to care about it. And it's not healthy. It's not good. And so it took me a long time to process, first, okay, I'm ill. These things are, these are some bad, obvious physical things. I cough a lot, whatever. But then you start seeing the ripple effects in your life. And yeah, when you notice something you can't do, or you have a bad day, it's gonna really bring you down, and it's okay to feel down in that day. But it sounds so cliche, but it's true. You got to get up the next day and say, you know what? Here's what I still have. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna run with it. But allow yourself to feel bad and grieve what you lose. There have been a lot of times where at the end of the day, I've had to leave a party early because I, started aspirating or something like that. And on the ride home, I'm just thinking, this is it. I'm just gonna be a hermit from now on. I'm never gonna talk to anyone. And I'm gonna hide in a cave. And I just mope for a night. But the next day I'm like, I gotta get up and do something. That's the important thing. And yeah, having positive people around you, having people who inspire you. I mean, people in this community are doing amazing things. One of our colleagues has mobility issues and still skis downhill. I don't know how this works, but he does, and it's amazing. But so yeah, take time to process, take time to feel what you need to feel. Don't push it down. Don't tough it out for no reason. But feel what you need to feel, but know that this, I like that phrase. It's a new chapter. This is what you've got. Let's see what we can make do with it tomorrow.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so after I was diagnosed, I went into a really, after my wedding, I kind of went into a depression. It was actually a pretty deep depression, just because I felt like my life as I knew it was over, that my whole world exploded, that I was going to, that I was never going to be normal again. And I think back on it now, and I know that, the real reason I had gotten out of that depression was going to support groups and finding people and finding caring and kind individuals who I can talk to about my scleroderma, who understand what I'm going through. So when I'm having a bad day and I say, I text my friends who have it and I say, hey, I'm just this is what I'm going through. And they understand and they just listen. They don't try to make it better. They just let you vent out your feelings. And so it, like Nikhil and Sade said, it is a-okay to have those feelings. I definitely would recommend finding someone who you can confide in. whether that is a parent, whether that's someone at a support group that you feel that you can have this repertoire with, and just if you're having a bad day, just let someone know. And then like Nikhil said, to like get up the next day and like, you have to keep going. I know that it's hard. It's not easy. It's, there's a point where you're just like, why? But I think that everyone here, especially, the people who talking today, we all could have just easily said, nope, I don't want to do this. But we're all here, sharing our story, sharing our voice, advocating for scleroderma. And if that's something that keeps you, it's something that kept me going. It's something that I was like, this is my purpose. This is what I'm going to do. I want to share my story. I don't want anyone ever to feel like how I felt after my diagnosis. And that's what I just keep replaying when I'm having those bad days, when I don't feel like hosting a support group, when I just feel like laying in bed. I'm like, I don't want anyone else to feel like how I felt. So I'm just going to keep going. And then I take the time for myself to say, okay, I had those feelings. I'm going to take the time to, do nothing, spend time with my family, do things that I love. But I think it's a balance. It's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight, but I really think that like we all said, finding something that keeps you going.
Thank you so much, Sade, Nikhil, Amanda. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and for being so open with everyone. Thank you to everyone who participated, submitted questions, and came to listen with us. If you have questions about support groups, as Ashley mentioned in the chat, you can email support@scleroderma.org. That's a great place to get more information about how you can find the right one for you. I encourage you, if you're able to, check out the National Scleroderma Conference. It's a great way to build community and to meet some folks and to share what you've learned and to learn new things. And then, of course, this is just the first in our Teal Talk series. We have our next talk next Thursday, the 13th. That's going to be on stem cell transplants in scleroderma. Thursday, June 20th, what's exciting in scleroderma research. And then on Thursday, June 27th, we're going to talk about self-care toolkits and the importance of pets for folks living with chronic diseases. So all these are going to be exciting, really interesting topics. I hope you'll be able to join us. The links are on our website if you'd like to register and you haven't done so. But otherwise, again, Sade, Nikhil, Amanda, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of your knowledge, your experience, and for you being willing to share it with us today.